Hi guys, this is part 5 of our potato grow along, and I'm going to give you a little bit of an update on how the main crop potatoes are looking, but we're also going to start looking at harvesting my first early potatoes. So all I need is my basket to pop them in and a little bit of a spade, and if you're growing in raised beds like I am, then you may find that they're easy to pull out and you're not going to need to dig at all. If you're growing in the ground, then it's likely that you would need a full-size spade just to make sure that none are left behind and to manage to get up as many as you can. What you'll find is we're going to have some sizable potatoes and then we're going to have some really tiny potatoes. If you want to allow the tiny potatoes to develop, then one thing we can do is just root around in the compost and actually lift the larger ones and leave the plant in situ. This is something that is great to do if you don't need that area to plant anything else. For me personally, my sweet corn's going in there, so I do want to get them up and out of the way. Our early potatoes aren't the ones that are going to store for as long as the rest, but we will quickly have a look at how we can keep these stored for as long as possible and what we need to do just to help them dry out and get ready for storage as well. So these are the main crops that I've got growing in the large buckets that I have, and you can see that I've topped them with a layer of grass at the moment, and also I've added a little bit more feed as well, and then I'll top them next with a little bit of compost, and they'll want topping when they're just a few more inches high. Once they are at the top of the tubs, that's it, there is nothing more to do. And for the main crops, we're going to wait until the leaves completely die back before we look at harvesting these. As this is a raised bed, it isn't too difficult to grab hold of the plant and pull, and then there's the potatoes, and wow, there's an awful lot on that one. Okay, there they are. So you may also find a disgusting squidgy potato in there, and that's our seed potato. So if you put your hand into it, that's all it is. It's nothing to worry about, but it is rather disgusting. You can see there's some little potatoes on there. These are the ones that I'm talking about, that if we did leave the plant in the ground, they would become full-size potatoes if you've got the space and the ability to do so. I think that was probably all of them out of this patch. I'm just going to take the spade and just gently lift it and make sure that we haven't left any behind. Being that these are determinate potatoes, meaning that they don't grow further down, means that it's unlikely that we're going to find more, but it's always worth checking. And you will find that you've left some behind and they'll come up next year. There's another one there. There we go. If you can see it, that is the seed potato there that I've just put my hand in. It's lovely and squishy and disgusting. All these leaves are healthy and don't have any blight or anything like that, so they're going to go onto the compost. There's some really good sized potatoes in here as well. This is the last of the potatoes I've got here. Load up the slugs. Stick those over there. And what you can do is just root around in the compost and find your bigger ones, and then leave the plant in situ. You just feel around in the compost, pick out any larger ones that you can find, and then you can leave the plant in to continue growing any smaller ones. So this is how many that we've got out of these plants, and I think there was about maybe 16 plants in this bed. Variety is Pentland Javelin, and then I did also do one of the bucket as well, which is the Kestrels, and they're quite a bit smaller, but they are a second early variety. Any that are damaged, either from us digging them or they've split, need to be eaten first, and then some have also had some slug damage, which is, you know, that's going to go in the compost, that's no good. So to help store these now for as long as we can, I'm going to be popping a cloth over them and leaving them dirty just to allow them to dry off. Some people do this by leaving them on top of the compost for the day and just letting the sun actually harden them a little bit and dry them off. I don't do that just because I don't want any issue with any pests, and I find this easier. So I'm just going to pop a cloth over them, and then also pop a towel, just an old towel over as well. This is just to keep the light out and to make sure that none of them go green while they're starting to dry. This is 2 days later and the potatoes are now ready to go into storage. So they are dry, and we're going to now look at putting them between the bucket, which is where I'm going to put the ones that I need to use immediately, and then I've also got a old sack that I'm going to use just to pop the rest in. You can also buy sacks like this, and you can buy Hessian sacks as well, but an old pillowcase would work well, as long as it can go somewhere cool and dark and it can block out the light, and you can pop a towel or something over the top, then a old pillowcase would work fine. So these potatoes don't have too much mud on them, and that is because we've harvested them when the ground was reasonably dry. So if yours are looking really wet and you haven't harvested them yet, then it is probably worth waiting a couple of days for that soil to dry up. But otherwise it's just a matter of wiping off the mud if you can't wait. So any of these which have no blemishes on them and nothing split or anything like that are going to go into the sack. I will be checking these regularly to make sure they're okay, and I'm not expecting them to store for as long as I would the main crops. So do be aware of that with our early potatoes. But then you also see over here I've got some that are damaged, and I'll be setting these ones aside to use pretty much immediately. I'm not sure I'm going to get any use out of those. Some of them I know we didn't put the fork through and they have split really quite badly. Any that have got like a little bit of white out the top, that's just where they were attached to the parent plant, so don't worry about that. It's not shooting or anything, it's completely normal. So this one here you can see has got a hole in it. That is likely slug damage, which is more than usual, but then it's been a bad year for slugs, so that one's going to go into the bucket. Any like this one that are slightly green, I will be putting them in the bucket, but I will be checking them to see whether they're green all the way through before we eat them, or whether it's just a tiny bit that I can cut off. If you've got some that are very green, then I would definitely put them into the compost. You could also grade your potatoes into different sizes at this point if you have more than one sack, just to make it easier, especially if you've grown varieties that might be suitable for different things. So this is what I've been left with. I've got one that's been pretty much hollowed out by slugs that's going to go into the compost, and then the rest of these ones that are going to need using within the next couple of days are in the little bucket that I've got, and then the rest are in this sack, which will be good in there for a while, but I will be checking on these at least every couple of weeks. And then the next potatoes that I've got to harvest are the second earlies, so I'll be doing exactly the same with those, and I'll be harvesting those in about a week or two. So if you've got some as well, then you may want to start looking at whether or not they are large enough to lift. Don't forget that you can choose to lift one at a time, particularly if you've got them in pots. You can wait until you're ready to harvest them and then lift them. The only problem with doing that is you could end up with more slug damage than usual, just because the slugs have got more opportunity to get to them than they normally do, than if they would be stored inside.